Alright, so before we continue, I want to talk a little bit about sort of Houdini's folder structure. So if you remember me talking like a couple of videos back, we talked about this data tree on the left here. So you can click on this thing here and then you get the data tree. And let's say we make a geometry and call it object_1. Here we get an object called object1 and maybe copy paste it. So we also get an object2. You can see it in the data tree called object1, object2. And let's say in object1 we will make a pig and then put a null and call it out_pig. And then head over into object2 and then make object merge. And okay, so what you can see already happened here in the viewer here is that we have object, which is basically the folder object. So if you think of a Windows folder, for example, it would be a like your C drive, for example, and then in your C drive you have a couple of folders. You have a folder called object1 and object2, and then you have a have like inside of there you have a couple of files. Okay, and then we can look at a specific file. So what file we may be looking at? We are looking at, we want to look for our outpig file. So if we go on our object merge, and then we get the same thing, and then we can go into object1 and choose outpig. And you can see it will point to an absolute path where it is, well, in Windows it would be on the disk, but here it will point to the path, it will be inside of Houdini. So this is just an absolute path, which is easy to understand, right? It's just an absolute path on where it is located inside your, inside your structure, basically. But there's also something that's relative paths, which are a little bit more tricky to understand. So let's say I make a box. And let's append a transform to our object merge here. And we want to maybe, by the way, put this into this object. That will make it if this had world transformations, for example. Then you can see it works in here. If I didn't do this, then it would just stay at the center. So that's something to keep in mind, but let's put this to now for like this. All right, so put a transform here and put another transform on our box. And now let's transform our pig up a little bit by 2. Now let's say we want to do the same thing on our box. Well, what we can do is on this channel here, we can right click, copy parameter, and then right click on the transform of the box and paste relative references. All right, so you see it already moved up. And now you can see it points differently to the to the thing we're referencing. It's using 2 dots and then transform 1 and then ty. All right, so the way this is doing it is that by using 2 dots and slash, it will say, okay, I am currently this thing I'm looking for is outside of my own little folder. So this is like basically the folder that we're in. We want to go outside of this folder. So then we're in this location. Then we're looking for something called transform1, and then we're inside of there. We're looking for a parameter called ty. So this will be ty. So if we hover over this, it will say tx, ty, tz. So it's looking for that specific path. So that's just with the 2 dots and the slash. So that's basically how you can reference channels. For example, I could also use absolute paths for this. So I could type /obj /object. We are on object 2, and then we're transform 1 /ty. Right, so that's also working. So it's still, you can see it's still linked up. So, but in Houdini, you often use relative references to refer to stuff just inside of inside of your work area, for example. And this makes it a little bit confusing for some people. But just keep in mind that with the dots, you just basically say, where are you going to look? So if I'm going to type ... we're going to look outside of this thing. If I type ... again, you can see we get all the way to object level. Then I could even say I want to look inside of object 1. And then I want to, what did I have there? I had a test geometry, pig head. Then I could look inside of our pig geometry even if I want. So what do I want to look for? Let's say translate Y or something. Now you can see it goes back to 0. But that's because our pig here, you can see, so translate 0. You can see if I move this up, you can see right now the box moves with my pig because I am looking for it this way. So people who are familiar with something like Linux might be familiar with this way of working. Just keep in mind that just ... it just refers to going up a level inside of your folder structure and then pointing towards whatever you're looking for. Okay, now let's say, okay, why would I want to use relative reference instead of absolute references? Because I mean, it also works if I do it with the like the absolute reference, right? So /obj. So this also works, and this is probably easier to sort of understand like where it's coming from. Well, imagine if we're making an asset or like a scene that's going to be reusable, or let's say we have an effect that's gonna be used in this sequence, but also another sequence. This will work, but this won't. Because let me show you. Like let me copy and paste these over to a new Houdini sequence. Let's make a subnet inside of here. Let's make a subnetwork, and then do another subnetwork. Just completely change up the configuration, and then make a couple of objects in here. So right now, like over here, I have a subnet. So a subnetwork is, by the way, sort of like a folder you can use. I haven't shown those yet, but it's like a folder. So right now my structure will be subnet1 / subnet1 / object whatever. So if I go into object 2, you can see this one errors because it doesn't, like, it cannot find the object it was looking for at where it previously was. Well, this thing still works because this thing is using relative paths. So because it's just saying that go out of this object, then go to this object. So this will still work. So it's kind of important to understand this because we are going to use this path type structure. You're going to use that everywhere to point to objects, to point to channels. So I kind of wanted to get that out of the way and really explain like why something like this is important. I actually had this recorded a little bit in less detail. So the stuff that's going to be after this, I'm briefly explaining it, but I was talking to someone on Twitter and they pointed out like this was something I didn't understand that great when I was starting out with Houdini. So I thought maybe make a separate video about how this sort of works, so it's clear that when you're going to use these expressions later, when we're doing the procedural modeling and stuff, that you know sort of how this all works.